Hello, and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we have a special crossover episode with our good friends at the Borgo Pass Podcast, a look at the 1977 BBC film Count Dracula. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it, so warning, spoilers ahead. And I might add that we're probably going to talk about almost every other version of Dracula we've seen. So if you haven't seen all the versions of Dracula you can bear to see, we are going to
Get on
spoil
that.
all of them. So seriously, if you don't want to hear what happens to Jack Palance in his version, if you don't want to know what happens to Bela Lugosi in his version, either just accept that you're going to hear all about all the Draculas, or leave now and go watch all the Draculas and then come back. Okay, from Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castlebridge Media. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy, I'm from Texas, like in this movie. Hey, everybody.
Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards, who really is from Texas, I believe, is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, currently published by Comixology. Say hello, Mr. Drew.
Howdy. And yes,
Yeah.
Born, raised in Texas, and proud of it no matter what random New Yorkers think.
Right. No,
Yeah,
we're both from
apparently-
Texas.
and Tony,
but
are
maybe
you
not
from
as
Texas?
much Texas. Absolutely.
Okay, I apologize. I thought you were from the Deep South, and so
He'll fight you. He'll fight you.
Well, I'll fight some vampires. Like,
that's right. You've talked about
He's a diverse Southerner. He's lived in several Southern places.
yeah.
So finally, also in Denver, that is the voice of a Marylander. Color commentary from Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver.
I was born there, but I also grew up in Texas, and
All right, little
just
lady.
like the rest of you, except that Jason was born there and I was not.
I was indeed born
I
in
can actually
Dallas.
do a decent Texas accent, but right now I just can't do one because I have to make fun of the guy from this movie.
Oh, that's the whole point.
No, I know. I'm saying I also
Yeah.
I also feel the need to make fun of him and not do a proper. proper accent.
Drew was in New York, and apparently people were attacking his Texas accent, which just makes all of us sad and grieve for Drew. So
Well, especially because I don't hear a Texas accent in him, but he said his accent gets stronger when he gets further from Texas.
Oh,
which I think is kinda funny.
Jamie will back up on that.
It's like when my college roommate
I
used to, when she talked to her grandmother, suddenly she had this really thick Texas accent, and I'd be like, "What? Where is that coming from?"
Tony, you said hold up a
I
second.
happen to
What's
think
up?
that my drawl is charming.
It is charming. It's very charming. Yeah. And you're such a kind person. I can't believe anybody just sort of would be. Yeah. I'm sorry that you had to bear with that. Meanwhile, all right. Hang on. I'm gonna
That's an
have
interesting
to
point.
cut this stammering because I'm just contemplating something.
Well,
right now.
no, he's right. I think he's right.
I will. Yeah. I'll deal with that. I'll also delete this yammering that I'm doing right now. Let me just.
But
make
yeah, I
a-
agree because I also, you also outed my my birthplace, so I don't know how we can edit around that.
Well, I
You could
said
just
you were
beep
born
it.
in Maryland.
just-
Oh no, I did say
No,
Baltimore.
you did say, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can just beep it.
Yes, that's a great idea. And I will cut this stammering here. See, I keep
Sure.
a section in my document where I just put bullets of things to cut. Put stammering and cut the part where you're typing notes.
Yeah.
Cut the part where you're
And-
talking about the typing of notes. All right.
And the birthplace thing. Yeah. Anyway. Oh yeah. So yeah. Jim and Scott. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't know due to the length of our podcast how much that we cut anything. But here you go.
Well, that's because when you guys have been on our podcast, we haven't had to cut anything. It's been all protein.
That's
Right.
that's
Yeah.
great. All right, and tonight we are joined by our very good friends at the one and only Borgo Pass Podcast, musician Scott Kelly from Boston. Say hello, Scott.
Hello. If you want to talk about weird accents, you've come to the right guy. Born and bred here in the northeast of Massachusetts. So,
Nice.
hi
I
guys.
love it. Love it. And writer-director Jim Towns from way over on the other side of the country in Los Angeles. Say hello.
And originally from Pittsburgh, but I've worked incredibly hard to lose any trace of that accent, because if you guys haven't heard the Pittsburgh accent, it's something to be heard.
All I know
guys.
of the Pittsburgh accent is supposedly what was like in that Mayor of Easttown, where and
Well, that's the other side of the state. The Yinzer accent, as it's called, is, you have to imagine the worst New Jersey accent and the worst part of a West Virginia accent combined. It's something to behold. It's something to behold. It's beautiful. I hope to do a movie in all Yinzer someday that'll have to be subtitled, because it'll have to be subtitled.
fantastic.
Well, hearing Scott talk reminded me of Lawrence O'Donnell, who all of a sudden will go into this really deep, like Boston-y kind of accent, and it's just so funny because it's just like, whoa, that's a little trippy, because he's learned that broadcasters speak.
Yes.
But he can do it. He can pull it out.
That's really wonderful. Okay, Count Dracula, and that's what this film is called. And the crazy thing is, to me, if you say to me the movie is called Count Dracula, this is not even the first movie that pops into my head. But Count Dracula is a British television adaptation of the 1897 novel Dracula by Bram Stoker, produced by the BBC in what was called a video/film hybrid format. It aired on BBC Two in December of 1977. It aired in the United States, I believe, in Halloween, around Halloween of the following year, and directed by Philip Seville. It stars Louis Jourdan as Count Dracula and Frank Finlay as Professor Van Helsing. This is a film that I read about for many, many, many years before I had the opportunity to watch it. And in fact, I think it's possible this is the first time I've actually watched the whole thing. So what we're going to do is we'll get our opening thoughts. Let's try to keep them super brief, because there are 500 million people on this podcast this time. We've got 6 persons. So I'll skip my own. I'll just take us into a topic. So let's go Jim, Drew, Julia, Scott, and then Tony. Give me a few words. Give me your high level headline. Like, what are you going to be coming back on? Whatever you want to say, and then just throw it to the next. So, Jim, take it away.
Hey, well, thanks, Jason. Well, I think the two things I would say is, first of all, this is the first time I've seen the movie as well, which is great. And I think it was sometimes shown as a mini series. It sounds like it was shown over a course of a couple nights, kind of like they would do Gone with the Wind in America. And I think that might be the optimal way to watch this, is kind of a 2-3-parter, because it plays like that. I feel like I watched a really good play version of the story. Just happened to be on my TV. That's what it felt like to me. It was like a really nice theatrical presentation that was kind of low key in a lot of ways, but at the same time very, very faithful to the text.
Very good. And that reminds me of this joke that they had on SNL last night about all the movies about miserable marriages that are coming out, and one of them was a person whose review is, I went to the movies and I saw a goddamn play, where it's just you walk in and there's just people talking to one another in drawing rooms all day. Drew, what are your thoughts?
This is the third. Well, first of all, I do agree that it is best to watch this movie broken out for like two nights, because it's, it is very long and it is at times very stagey. But be that as may, this is my third time watching it. I really like this version. It was kind of hard to get a hold of for a long time in the States, so I didn't see it until about 12 years ago, I want to say. But I really like it. I like how it shows a lot of it shows a lot of affection for its source material in it, and I like that it's got a lot of the high adventure aspects of Dracula that are often missing from adaptations, and I really just love Frank Finlay as Van Helsing. I think he is really, really fun in the part, and he's very close to the more eccentric version from the book. In fact, I dare say out of all the screen Van Helsings, he's probably the closest to the Van Helsing in the book, in my opinion. But I enjoy this a lot. I actually have watched it a few times over the last few months since I noticed it cropped up on Amazon. So if anyone disliked it, I will take the blame on that one.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Julia, you were next.
Well, first I wanted to say that you said something about a sketch that was on SNL, but in case somebody is now stressing out going, wait, I didn't see that. It was actually not on. It was one of the cut ones, remember?
Yes, it
I
was cut
think.
for time. It was. You're
Yes.
right. It was.
So
You're right.
I
It was
just
a
wanted
sketch that was cut
to
for time.
ease the because I've definitely been the person who's like, I didn't see what did I miss something? Am I going crazy? Did my TV decide not? No, it was not actually on the episode. It was cut. But anyway, so
But you
this
can catch it on
film,
YouTube.
yes,
FYI. Yes. Okay.
this film to me, because it was, I guess, intended to be a miniseries, was way too long. I mean, I don't have the patience to watch a novel. So I actually was very, very impatient. Like I felt anxious. We stopped it like maybe 6 times before, like when we were watching, we just kept. So I was like, no, I can't. It's too long. Because there were so many things where I just be like, this doesn't need to be here. Why is this here? Like, why are we taking a good 20 seconds for the mom to close a closet door? Like, why? Anyway, so that was my thing. But I loved a lot of it. I thought that some of the effects were a little corny, but some of the effects were awesome. Like the smoke machine effects to me were used more beautifully than I've ever seen smoke machine effects be used. I think that the performances are brilliant, really interesting performances. I can't wait to talk about some of those. And yeah, you really are worried. I was really worried for Jonathan. Like after we didn't see him for a while, I was like, "So what happened to Jonathan? I have to know."
Yeah.
So I thought it was very good. He was suspenseful, even though we all know the story. It was still suspenseful. So I'm glad I watched it. I really wish that I could have had like a special cut that was not 2.5 hours. But anyway, yeah, it was good.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Scott, what about you?
Yeah, this is my first time ever seeing this film, and I mean, over the course of my life, I feel like I've seen so many Dracula films, some good, some bad. But what I really liked about this one is I felt like it hit all of the important tropes. So I guess at the end of the day, I felt like I was almost putting on like an old pair of shoes.
Yeah.
And I'm with Julie. It was long, but at the same time, it was very comforting. I loved, I mean, the scenery, the atmosphere. God, the smoke machine was just fantastic. I love like the Predator infrared, sighting
Yeah.
of, Dracula and stuff. That was really neat. One thing I wasn't, and we'll get into it a little bit more. I wasn't a huge fan of Louise Jourdain's portrayal of Dracula, and we'll get into it. I thought Van Helsing, Frank Finley did a great job. I am such a huge fan of Dwight Frye for Renfield, and I almost taken it almost too personally. I'm very protective of that role. But I thought, Jack Shepard brought a really good take. It was a different take. He wasn't trying to emulate, Dwight Frye, but he did it well in his own way. But I had a lot of fun with this, and I think they kept to the original story just enough, and they changed a couple things Michelle will get into with Mina and Lucy now being sisters, and a couple of little things. But I do have to say I had quite a probably a 7-year-old Scotty geekdom when I saw Judy Boca for the first time. So she played, Mina Westerner, and I was a huge, huge fan of
Really?
Clash of the Titans back in
Oh.
1981. And I just loved Andromeda. So you got to picture me, 7 years old, just watching Clash of the Titans, and she was just beautiful. I had such a crush. So first scene of this movie is, Judy doing her thing with Hacker. It was great. So I knew I was going to love the film right after that.
That's really cool. Thank you. Tony, any thoughts?
Oh yeah. Well, this is the movie. I guess it was shown in '78. Over the course of it says I thought it was 2, but and the internet says 3 nights on PBS. Great performances. We didn't have cable, of course. I was, we weren't very rich at the time at all, and so PBS was a big staple in our house. So this movie specifically, when we get to our first vampire that gets staked, just freaked out a kindergarten aged Tony. Because I watched a lot of Universal horror. We had Monster Theater on Saturdays, and I think this was shown over the course, I want to say over the course of weekends, but I can't remember. But that scene I remember vividly, like hiding in the bathroom, which was super dark, and I don't know why that would be, but I'm in kindergarten. What does a kid know? But yeah, my parents, because up until that point, I'm sure that we were watching because it's like the novel. It's on great performances.
Mhm.
What could go wrong letting your kid watch this? And then that happens, and just there's gore at that point, and screaming, and so early on, this was the movie. For some kids of that era, it might have been Alien. It just depends, but this one was the one that just freaked me out.
For me,
And
it was
I'd seen
Poltergeist. No, Poltergeist 2, because we watched it,
Mm,
and we were sleeping in a place where there was a mirror right next to where we were sleeping, and I remember being like
oh
completely freaked
yeah.
out by the mirror.
That's really
I saw
funny.
that in the theater, but yeah, that's definitely one. But this film was a really early on freak out movie. I really like it, and I think it does serve best in 2 to 3 parts, like how it was originally shown. And I think that's why if somebody says, "Oh, it feels overly long," is because the pacing would. That's very deliberate.
Yeah.
Watching it in one sitting isn't really how it was intended. So
Well, no, I
I
think
don't
they
think anybody
showed
will
it in one
disagree with that.
sitting the first time, and then they broke it up, is what it said in the because I think in the IMDb it said that it was
Hmm.
shown
Oh,
in
maybe.
one.
I just
Yeah,
can't imagine it though. That would be spread out
yeah.
across
It
like
says when
4
first shown on
hours
British
of.
television in December 1977, the film was shown all in one evening, lasting 155 minutes. When it
Huh.
was repeated in 1979, it was split into 3 episodes. Yeah,
Interesting.
Mind-boggling. I hope they got an intermission in there.
right.
Yeah.
Would
I
there have been
really
commercials
wish.
in it then? I don't know.
Well, I mean, BBC, they do the commercials differently, right? They'll have
They
like
do, yeah, I don't know.
at the
So,
beginning
so
and
that
the
would
end.
extend the time. I don't know. At least
So
give it a bathroom break.
yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
would hope that there's an intermission, just like in My Fair Lady or whatever. But you know how Toby Hooper's Salem's Lot was a miniseries, but they did create a theatrical release version that was 90 minutes long.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, watching this movie, I just yearned for somebody to say, "Hey, what do you know? In 1980, there was a little scene, 90-minute theatrical version." I would have killed for that. I would have, because it would be so great to just take a meat cleaver and hack an hour out of this movie. I would have been so happy to see that.
Well, I like it. I like having all the parts. Like I like thinking of it as a miniseries because
Yeah.
of how much coverage there is. I think
Mhm.
it's there's changes.
I'm with
but it's
Tony
still
on
accurate.
that. Yeah.
I could see like everybody kind of agrees like, hey, it feels long if you kind of watch it one sitting.
True.
It's paced a certain way, but I think having this version together like that, like I wouldn't want it cut. I would just recommend kind of breaking it up.
Okay, fair.
That's
Well,
my
and-
opinion.
I would definitely
Yeah.
cut a lot of it.
In fairness, I did tell y'all that it's better watched over a couple before I left for
sure.
New York.
Yeah.
No,
And
I know, but I'm
I-
saying we did watch it over a couple of nights. I'm just saying there was a lot of stuff that I thought didn't need to be there for me.
So let's get into a
Personally,
little bit.
as somebody who tends to like stuff that's a little lengthier with certain things, like I will say this, like there's dozens of versions of Dracula that are chopped down versions of the story. I
Right.
kind of like that there is this like epic length version of Dracula out there. Like that's what
Fair.
I would go to this one for.
Sure.
Well, and let's get a little bit back to the movie, to the accuracy to the book in a little bit. So I want to talk first about the character of Dracula himself, like how, and come at this any way that you want. Like one way you could come at it is how you would compare Louis Jourdan's version of Dracula to your favorite version. And let me just throw out, for me, the way that Louis Jourdan comes across here is as a rather, and I like him, but the way he's choosing to do this, because we just watched Palance, and Palance was done just 4 years before this movie, okay? But this is a British film, so maybe they didn't see Palance. This film is coming 20 years, 19, I suppose, after the really popular British version with Christopher Lee. So what is Louis Jourdan giving us? Louis Jourdan is giving us a very bored, very self-impressed, very sort of sexy Euro trash Dracula. Like he is just completely like besotted with himself, I feel, as
I respect the hell out of him for knowing that he had to do something different. I mean, he couldn't
Yeah.
come. He's not going to upstage Christopher Lee, who,
Right.
basically, I mean, next to Lugosi is just such an iconic role. So I
right.
do give him credit for trying something different. I think, I've read that he kind of came in wanting to be like the angel. He never thought of himself as like the devil incarnate. He was trying to be, this angelic person who thought he was doing good. And again, for me, the reason I love look, I mean, Tim, so I'm going to show my hand. My favorite Dracula has always been Lugosi because I think he
Yeah.
can play the, certain parts of like the romantic side. He can, kind of, sway women into his arms before he, attacks. Lee, not so much. I mean, I know he has, bits and pieces of kind of, showing his humanity, but really he's just like a freight train.
Yeah.
I mean, Christopher Lee, he really is. He's just like a juggernaut. So I think, I'm not sure if Juzan was trying to pick a little bit from Lugosi, a little bit from Lee. Just honestly, it didn't quite work for me.
What did you guys think? Anybody?
Well, I just want to say about that. I'm not necessarily which one of my favorites. I really haven't thought about that. But I wanted to say that the thing that I loved about Louis Jourdain's performance is that whole, like you said, self-impressed. Like I think he's just the smugness is it's refreshing. It's different. Like when he walks in, when he uses the secret wall to walk and walks in on Van Helsing and whichever one it was that was assisting him at that moment, like setting up how they're gonna kill, and then he's just like, "Oh hey," he like slams a drawer shut, and then Van Helsing holds up the cross, and he's just like, "That's cute," He's just like,
yes.
"That's really
Yeah.
cute." That
It's
you
more
think that's gonna
convincing
work.
in Latin, isn't it, Professor?
That was a great
Yeah.
line. That was my favorite line of the
Great
whole
line.
film. Favorite line of the whole film. Yes. So
I-
I just thought that was really
He
fun.
he kind of reminds me of Namor from Marvel Comics, actually. He's got like a similar, like, sort of haughtiness about him that I find
Yes.
he's definitely not my favorite Dracula. Like I am also not going to surprise anybody here, but I'm also a Lugosi guy. But I don't know that I would say that this version didn't quite work for me. I think it's interesting. Like one of the reasons that I like going to different versions of Dracula is seeing all the variations, and I think that getting this sort of aristocrat, very leaning into the aristocratic part
Right.
of
Yes.
Dracula. I think that's an interesting take.
Well-
Because he does very guilty.
Oh, I like how he's also plays up the look. A lot of better people than you have tried to kill me,
Yes.
and I've survived
Yeah.
all this time. And
Yeah.
trust me, like I know some things. I've seen a lot. Like even when he, when Harker goes, "Oh, you must know a lot about Transylvania," and he goes, "Yeah," like it's
Right.
more
there,
than
done that.
more
Or
than
when they walk up to him and he's like in the box and he just kind of like they look at him, he just kind of grins, and then like he just
Right.
doesn't care, or like the sunlight's bothing him, so he closes the box, but he doesn't
Yeah,
like
yeah.
burst into flames or anything. He just kind of is like, "Oh,
I
it's
just-
annoying."
see, I never really get the sense of I just think the weight of centuries being dead. I mean, if he came across, it reminds me of like Brides of Dracula, one of the Hammer films, and that
Yeah.
Christopher Lee wasn't in that. The Dracula in that was a very young, almost a teenage Dracula who might have
That's
been,
right.
a vamp for 20 or 30 years. And you totally, and you got that. He didn't, with Lugosi, you believe he's probably been dead for 500, 600, 700 years. Like he sounded like an alien. I mean, he
That's
forgot how
funny.
to,
Yeah.
he forgot how to
The-
communicate
the-
with the human race.
Yeah, the
And,
weight of centuries. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think that was in some ways. I wonder if that was also intentional here, where he's basically tried to change with the times. In fact, that's what he's trying to do when even though some of it is BS. Oh no, I want to keep you here. Of course, he wants to keep him there for other reasons, but when he says like, no, I need to fit in
Yeah.
England, and I think that I agree with you about. It doesn't feel as weighty, but I also think that that's a choice of him, and kind of what Jason was saying, where he's an angel. He's tried to change enough that he feels in place with whatever time period he's in, and so it doesn't have that weight because he goes, well, I need to keep on keeping on, except for the parts where he is a vampire, and that he's just gonna go full bore. Like he has no problems like crawling down his castle like a bat.
Like a bat.
Although it does make sense in some ways, this is an improvement on the source material, because like Dracula seems so weird when he's introduced in the book, and even in the Lugosi film, like you're wondering why you wouldn't just leave that castle immediately, whereas like with this version of Dracula, he's so genteel that like initially I do think that it makes sense that Harker has this like false sense
Right.
of security. Like he doesn't seem
But-
like he is fitting in,
Right.
what he's doing is
Yeah.
working.
But he also doesn't have any qualms with going, yeah, those plates are 400 years old. Like,
Yeah,
you're eating off
yeah.
400-year-old plates.
Yes. I love.
Guy. Like his little barbs at the fleeting lives of normal humans is
He's
really
so
great.
arrogant. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But because Harker is English, there's that line in Dracula's Guest that Stoker has where he explains to somebody else, because Harker is English, he is adventurous. So Dracula is an amateur psychologist in a sense. Dracula knows exactly what buttons to push to keep Harker exactly here for longer than
Yeah.
Harker. Harker knows better than to stick around, but Dracula knows that Harker, as a good working lawyer, is going to bend over backwards for a Count. And so Dracula's like, listen, you're here to serve at my will, and that's just the way things are supposed to be. And he doesn't hide all of this. He goes, it's in your boss's letter. You're here to serve at my will, so you're going to stick around for a month. And Harker's like, well, gosh, as long as that. And Dracula's like, yes, because it's my wish, and you're not going to argue with me, right? And to the point where Dracula eventually is just openly, obviously gaslighting Harker, and Harker is too polite to.
Well, at first he's too polite, but then he
argue.
looks out the window and sees the dude scaling the wall and is like, "Holy crap! I'm
That is so.
over my head now."
Okay, I want to talk about the reptilianness real quick of this guy, because the other thing, Dracula devolves in a sense, like when he's climbing down the wall, he does seem like a bat climbing a wall. And when he's in his sleep, when he's sleeping, he is a weird rat. I mean, not literally, but he seems reptilian in the sense that he's just sort of a lip smacking sleeping thing that isn't, he doesn't have any of
Well,
the
and all the
artifice.
brides sleep with their eyes open.
Oh my gosh, that's
But
wild.
they all have some kind of consciousnness, though.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
a little
To
bit.
some
feel
level,
like
like they don't have
it's-
power. I don't think they could defend themselves, but there's some level of consciousness that you didn't
Well, it's
see.
like their reptile. It's like what you're saying, Jason. It's like their reptile brain is still working. Kind
Yes.
of. It's like the instinct thing. So it's like he's still in this deep REM sleep kind of thing happening, and Harker's trying to beat him with a shovel. It's just like he's not with enough that he's going to retaliate, but he's with enough that he's like out of body enough that he can be amused by the guy's efforts.
Isn't that great? I mean, there's
It's
that
just
wonderful
creepy enough,
moment,
yeah.
by the way. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jim. I'm sorry.
No, I'm good.
There's a moment in Scars of Dracula, which is nobody's favorite Dracula movie, but where Dracula in his sleep knows that the idiots are attacking his castle, and so Dracula in his sleep sicks an army of bats on the town, which always struck me as the damn coolest thing I ever saw Dracula do, where he's just like he can't or won't wake up, but what he can do is send a bunch of bats to like rend people limb from limb, and I loved that, and that was Christopher Lee again. But
isn't there stuff in like Interview with the Vampire where sometimes they'll wake up and there'll be like a dead human there that they killed while in their sleep and they don't remember it?
Maybe
Because
I actually
it's just
can't
instinct
remember.
that they do that. I think there's stuff like that in Lestat or something where they don't wake up enough from their daytime whatever rest to be aware of it, but then they wake up like, oh, some guy must have tried to kill me, and I obviously it's like just muscle memory, I guess. Yeah.
The funniest thing
Possibly,
about those books, by the way, and I don't want to get too far afield, but the greatest thing there was that she came up with this innovation of this sort of existential dread that vampires would fall into, at which point they would get suicidal enough and just sort of bury themselves in the sand until
which
they
explains
felt
why there's
better.
not a billion of them, right? If their bite spreads the disease and those people bite, they should be increasing at a mathematical,
Oh yeah,
multitude.
so that's her reason,
And
is
it
they get
explains
suicidal.
why we're not overrun, I think. Yeah,
That's really funny.
that's what I've heard it explained.
Okay, so that's Jourdain. I love Jourdain. As an actor, he's in some of my favorite 50s movies, and he's always this sort of smarmy, I know I'm sexier than all the rest of y'all kind of guy, and so he's doing the same thing here. There is one other thing that doesn't happen here that does happen in a lot of the other Draculas. This movie is quite beholden to the book, and so it doesn't do, like with Langella and with Lugosi and a lot of the others. Dracula moves to town and starts hanging out and wandering it around the drawing room and flirting openly with the ladies and stuff. None of that here. He's not part of their clique at all, ever. and that's interesting that they stay so separated.
But he falls out of the middle of the film, really. I mean, the second whole act of the film, there's very precious little Dracula action happening. Which is that maybe some of the danger of being so faithful to the book that in doing that you run the risk of having some of these issues with that sometimes the book has, that we could say it gets a little less dynamic in the middle part.
I mean, it's possible. It could also be just like, hey, it's the BBC. We're in England again. Let's just do some stuff in England. This is what it was like. Here you go. You get your Downton Abbey kind of thing.
Yeah.
One thing, I don't know if you guys had seen this in other Dracula films, but are there any other versions where Lucy and Mina are sisters? I always really appreciated the fact that they were friends. And even there was some, going back to the original, Dracula novel, rumors of there being lesbian lovers.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. Have you anyone aware of any other take on, Dracula in any form where they're sisters?
Wasn't aware of any of the lesbian stuff. Lucy is always the one who has a lot more sexual expression than Mina. But I've never seen them be sisters before. You're right. I'm not aware. I mean, God knows there's so many versions of this that they
Yeah,
may very well
I just
be another.
Googled it and it says the 1973 Dracula episode of the Canadian Purple Playhouse has them as sisters.
How did I not know that, Julia?
That's the only other one on here other than the one that we just watched. So it does not appear that that's common. But even with the sisters thing, and this is very not uncommon to fiction, they still made them kind of a little too intimate, especially at the beginning when they're in the bed together and they're just like, it's always very like, I don't know. It's not that sisters can't behave that way. I just think that you could definitely continue to have these thoughts because there's all these illusions in fiction and probably real life where people are like, oh, sisters, do you want to whatever? And it's like, no, that's gross. Stop.
Right.
I mean, like in the Coppola film, they actually kiss. There's a really quick, cut scene of them, locking lips. I'm just not sure. I did look it up to find reasons why they would want to change them to sisters, and maybe just the sheer fact that they wanted to do. And I'm talking the filmmakers here, just wanted to put their own stamp on this.
They're just.
I think they wanted to. I think they wanted to introduce the mom character as being more, because the mother character is pretty important, especially when she gets killed by the wolf being near her.
Boy, that's weird.
Yeah, so I think that was part of it, is that they wanted her to be the mother for both of them.
Also, you don't have to come up with an excuse why they're always hanging out.
Right.
Like, of course they're going to go to the family home. Of course they're going to stay. Like, you can keep it all in one area, and it doesn't have to be like, hello, I've come from my house yet again.
I think adaptations of this novel,
contained, and not that you would do it that heavy-handed, but just it gives an excuse to be in constant contact.
Yes,
so
that's right.
and tearing the family apart is something as well.
Before we get into some of the topics, I wanted to touch on another major character. So Van Helsing here is played by Frank Finlay, and my quick take is that I actually really like this Van Helsing a lot. He reminds me a lot of the character in the novel in his everything, his fatherliness and his he's a very human Van Helsing, and I liked him a lot. Drew, you said this is like one of your favorites. Why? What do you think? What's working for you?
I think two things. One is that they allow the character be very odd, and I think it's really important to the Van Helsing Dracula dynamic. Like, Dracula is the other, but his opposing force is also the other, and I think you have to have that. So they let him play very eccentric. He sometimes struggles with his English a little bit, and then occasionally he just does these beat things. Like there's one point where all the vampire hunters have gathered, and he's making them hot cocoa. Like, and this, the second stuff, is sort of what you say. I like how fatherly he is. Like there's often, I think, contemporary Van Helsings tend to kind of, there's this like knee-jerk reaction to sort of deconstruct the character, and it's this is obviously before all that, but it's nice to see a more tender version. He still gets all his vampire hunter stuff, done, but they allow him to have a lot of humanity.
Well, I mean, compare him to say Peter Cushing, who I mean, I'm trying to think how that's different from Peter Cushing, who's probably my favorite. Yeah, and Scott, do you
Peter
have any
Cushing
thoughts about?
plays it almost like Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah,
You beat
Yeah.
me to it, Drew. I was going to say that I think the difference is he almost like the Van Helsing's that, and I love Peter Cushing very, very much. But going like say the Coppola film, like the Van Helsing's that really interests me. They almost remind me of like Batman, Bruce Wayne. They're heroic, but at the same time, there's absolutely madness to them. They are a disjointed and unbalanced personality. And this Van Helsing, Dr. I think does a great job at kind of riding that line that, he is heroic. He is the subject matter expert on Dracula. But at the same time, he's not quite there. You could see him not quite fitting in at, if he's a professor at a university, the other professors are probably talking about this dude when he goes home at the end of the day. Like, I wish he would read.
Good.
Yeah, Julie, I'm sorry.
No, finish your sentence.
I'm good.
Okay. This Van Helsing, I liked that he was pretty diplomatic. Like he doesn't just out the gate go, "Hey, this is vampires." He's like, "So maybe you should, garlic has got properties that are cool. You should maybe wear this." And I wish he would have told the mom that she needed to wear it, but whatever.
That's a communications breakdown that happens in every Dracula
in every
movie.
story, right?
Yeah.
But then the other thing though that irritated me was he's so smart, and yet when they go, Mina's not feeling well, he's just totally ignores that. And I'm like, if I were living in this universe, I'd be like, not feeling well, how? What, have you checked your neck?
Right.
Like, what's going on? He just kind of seems like not quite getting there fast enough a lot of the times. But yeah, it's interesting, but I love that he's just like, so okay, so this is what we have to do. I'm going to show you how she's eating this baby. She's materned this child, or like whatever, and not the baby. The baby was for the brides. By the way, that's what I was going to say when we were talking before we started, and I said I disagree that the staking of the heart comes out of nowhere, and the screaming. That thing with the baby and like the brides killing the little baby is so gruesome to me. It's such a dark. You guys were talking about how that's not that dark. I'm like, no, this is a really dark.
Although
story.
that appeared, in this one, it's kind of neat that Dracula brings the baby in a rather fetching red carpet bag. And in the wonderful Jess Franco, it's like in a sack, like you would carry a rabbit in, and.
Well, he looks silly with a baby Bjorn, right?
Yeah. Oh God, that would be so funny if he had like a little
Sling.
Bjorn.
Yeah,
But
but
wait,
the baby.
Three brides
is
and a
terrifying.
baby. The new sitcom.
Right.
Oh, I love that idea.
But anyway, just going back to the thing I was
imagine, if
saying
you
real
will-
quick, was when he shows Lucy that Lucy is a beast. Like she's like, oh, by the way, her performance as a vampire is so terrifying. She's like so creepy. Anyway, so I just thought that was cool that he's like, I want you to see what we're dealing with. Okay, now let's kill her and let's just move forward. I thought it was great.
So
Well-
I want to go back for a moment about Dracula with the baby, and that scene is really interesting because leading up to the baby, the baby is a consolation prize because he can't let them eat Harker yet for reasons, because he's doing his English lessons or whatever the hell, and compare that, because when Christopher Lee does this scene in 1970, Christopher Lee, so the ladies are like all around Harker going, there are kisses for us all, blah blah blah, and the doors are just thrown open like a Jim Steinman video, and Christopher Lee comes in and he goes, "Back, this man belongs to me," and then he like throws them physically across the room, and then he points at a baby and says, "You get the baby, because this man belongs to me." That's how it's done. Louis Jourdan, same dialogue, and he reads it entirely differently. He's back. This man belongs to me, and blah blah blah. It is the weirdest, most reversed reading of, and it's almost as though director had seen Jess Franco's version or Christopher Lee's version and said, "I want you to do every living thing that is the opposite of how Christopher Lee did it." It's not a complaint, but it gives you a weird reading of that scene. So.
Jim,
By the
and
way,
no, I'm sorry, Tony.
Scott, I think my favorite kind of unhinged Dracula is from Nadja the Vampire, which is I love that. I love that Van Helsing. Sorry. I just think that Van Helsing is great.
That was
You're
Yeah,
talking
it
about
is.
Peter Fonda, right?
Yeah,
yeah, it was
yeah.
Peter Fonda.
Yeah, Peter
Yes.
Fonda is
Yeah.
great as
Mhm.
but he's kind of got a real. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember kind of real manic air. What I like about this Van Helsing is there's still those moments, but for the most part, he knows he has to fit into society because he's going to tell them some pretty hard to take things along the way.
Yeah.
So he's got an excellent bedside manner. Oh, let me see your teeth. Oh yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
And like but all of
Yes.
that he has to make palatable because you can't just cut to, hey, by the way, like you were saying, like, oh, I'm Batman or Sherlock Holmes, there's vampires. Like, you can't. This is a man who's kind of learned, and he only gets
Diplomacy.
unhinged when people are about to do things that are going to harm them, or he knows, like, I can't soft pedal this thing right now. Like,
Yeah.
if I don't cut in, it's going to be dangerous. And I like that how he treads that line throughout, and then he relies on proof, because each time he goes, okay, well, now do you believe me? Like, I'm going to tell you the rest, but you've seen this. Can you do this? But up until that point, he goes, oh, you know what? I need to do some research. I need these books. And he kind of lets it settle out. And I just like that there's measured performance up until where he just has to go, no, don't do this. Like,
Yeah.
he has, and I think that just was really great to see that in this performance.
So Jason,
Jim, I
just
think
really
you were
quick, I
gonna
know
say
you'd mentioned the line, get away from him, back off, this man belongs to me. And I believe that was an original line in the 31 film that was either cut by the censors or cut in,
Really?
Jim, maybe you can refresh my memory from our
Yeah,
episode.
I think that came off a little too homoerotic for
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
31 thing, and I think even at this point in the swinging 70s, we're kind of still dealing with an identity issue with Dracula as is he a heterosexual bloodsucker, or is he a unisex bloodsucker? Does he differentiate?
Pansexual.
Yeah. I mean, he's okay with a Harker kind of, but after that, he becomes a guy who is mostly exclusively just has a type, like a serial killer.
Yeah.
And I think that is more the well, I think it's Bram Stoker's basic conceit, right? As a man of his era, that of course a male vampire would only bite females. But I do think it's also studios, networks, whatever, dealing with what they would be happy to do versus what they know is going to cause them problems, and so you end up with this sort of censored idea of what a Count Dracula would be drawn to.
By the way, I have a question about the nature of Dracula. Can he shapeshift into another person, a different person? Because he can shapeshift into all these animals. He can turn into mist. But I'm wondering if he can actually pretend to be somebody different. I haven't seen him do that.
I've never thought about
in the book,
They did
in the book he
they
starts off old and
that
gets
in
young.
Blade 3.
Wait, in the book he does what, Jim?
In the book, he starts off old and then becomes young as he gets to America.
Right,
Gets to
and in several of the
England, I think.
movies. Yeah. But I'm
Yeah,
wondering if
yeah.
he can be a completely different person. What were you saying, Drew?
They did do that with Dracula in Blade 3. If you can, although that's like such a bizarre version of it, I can see why that's not on anybody's mindset. I personally do not like the idea of him becoming other people, because I sort of feel like one of the things I think about Dracula is sort of like going up and down the evolutionary scale, and that's why he becomes all these animals and beasts. But I don't know, other people that just trifle advanced for some reason.
Well, I always see it. There's two reasons why he may not. Like, maybe he can, but A, he's freaking Dracula. Why would he want to be anybody else? Like,
his powers are limited by his ego. Amazing.
Well, yeah,
A lot
and
of
then-
his problems. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Two, he doesn't have to, because he can just glamour anybody. Like, he just goes, hey, forget that I was here, or I'm here for a reason, or all the kind of hypnosis stuff he can do. There's not a really good. He wouldn't even have to transform. He could just be like, oh, you saw a police officer. In the same way in here, he's has the audacity to be the coach driver for Harker. And Harker's like, no, that guy's Dracula.
Ballsy.
She's like, okay. Sure. Are you seeing Dracula's? Am I a Dracula?
God, he yanks
Dracula
Harker's
here with
cane.
a-
Like, no, that guy is Dracula. Like, but that's part of his ego. Is
Yeah.
Wouldn't I am really gonna mess with this guy? Like, I'm gonna make sure. Oh, he's at his house. Let me just drive him there.
Yeah.
Like that, and so those two things are why, even if he might be able to do that, he's so enamored with being Dracula that why would I be anybody else? This is being Dracula's great. Or and it kind of goes hand in hand. He doesn't even have to try that hard because he can just, tell people whatever he wants them to think, and that's it. So I mean, even if it is true, I think he, his own, like Jason said, his own ego prevents that, because why would he?
I always enjoyed some of the scenes, and it's in this Dracula movie too, and the 31 Dracula, where he's, obviously Dracula heads out to, the Borgo Pass to pick up Harker, and it's clearly Dracula, the coach driver. Like,
Yes.
he couldn't find, a minion to do that. So to your point, Tony, he loves the game.
Yeah.
Right.
He
Oh,
loves
yeah.
the thought of just bringing food right to his front door.
Yeah.
Yeah. To the point where he's willing to go, because you have to imagine when he's serving Harker on the golden plates and everything, he's serving him this chicken and everything. And at some point, if they're alone in the house, that means at some point Dracula is in the kitchen with an apron on,
Yes.
making chicken and trying to remember when was the last time Dracula ate food. Like,
Right.
Scott, we talked about this on our episode with Dracula. Like, what in like 1400 or something was the last time did he even ever cook food? He was a noble, so he's had to figure out how to make food for this guy in order to keep up his. That's how badly he wants to keep the illusion going. Is he's willing to do all these like servant things.
Or can the brides do it? Are the brides doing it?
No, I think he's I like to think of that his own ego won't let him do anything less than, say, an episode of Hannibal, where Dracula's gonna go, look, I hate, like, I didn't cook, like, I was a nobleman, but if I am gonna cook, it's gonna be amazing. And he's gonna ask things like, oh, what do you think of the food? The cook was really great, right? Oh, this is
and I'm just imagining Dracula going on Hell's Kitchen now.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Another really interesting thing here, I'd like to switch a little bit, but I can use Van Helsing as a springboard from it. One of the things, that Van Helsing has, when it comes time to stake Lucy, Van Helsing has Lucy's betrothed do it, because the staking is interpreted explicitly by Van Helsing as an inherently sexual act. And there is sexuality just weirdly wrapped all through this thing in a way that just strikes me as this is why it was so popular with the Victorians, because there's something so goddamn weird all the way through about the repressed sexuality of this book and this movie. And it becomes a little explicit in this 1977 BBC version, because Lucy, I love, and Julia, I think this is what you were talking about. There's a point where Lucy says something like, kiss me, and then she sticks out her tongue and goes, "Lah."
That was so funny. I love that whole thing. By the way, that girl gets around, man. She's got so many
Lucy?
freaking suitors. Yeah.
Well,
She's
yeah,
like
and it's played different ways. Sometimes she's like, as here, she's very sexually excited, but she doesn't, like, per se actually get around.
that we know.
And in others,
But
she's
yet,
kind of a
you say
hussy.
that. Okay, so here's a question. How come when Mina finds her out in the whatever, the cemetery or whatever it was, getting mauled by Dracula, does she act like she didn't see that?
Why does
Has
Mina
she
act
been
like she didn't see the guy?
like she didn't see the guy biting Lucy's
That's
neck?
not how I read it.
Is it because she didn't, like, she doesn't remember because he put the like a trance on her, so she doesn't remember it? Or does she just think, yeah, Lucy gets around, I'm not surprised this guy is like biting her
So
neck.
I'm never going to mention it again.
I'm never going to mention it again.
I don't know. How did you guys read that scene? Mina finds Lucy being bitten by Dracula. She's moaning ecstatically. Mina runs out and grabs Lucy, puts a shawl around her. Lucy says, "Hey, don't tell our mom. She'd be offended by whatever."
And then, oh, I must have pricked your neck with the pin when I
The
pinned your
brooch,
brooch.
yeah.
Well, this movie version does pay tribute to the book where Lucy does have a habit of sleepwalking, and so it's the idea, I think, is this is probably not the first time Mina has found Lucy somewhere in the midst of where she shouldn't be. And in the book, I think they just mentioned she sees a shape hovering over her and takes her back, and then again, like you guys said, she thinks she speared her neck with the clasp of the brooch. Which I love that element. They do it really well. I've never seen it in another film version of the book, and it at least makes all the main characters seem a little less dense,
Right.
because there's a reason that mark's there. They're not low, like that shouldn't be there. Like it actually buys you some believability in that. As far as this version where she definitely sees where there's a dude lurking of her, yeah, I don't know. That pushes it a little bit, and maybe she's just woken up from sleep too. Maybe she thinks she was seeing and stuff like that. I love that they really filmed at that Whitby location here. The real location set in the book, and with the tombstones on the hill and the cliff.
Yeah,
and
is that
and the
in
ruins.
fact
That's
what this looks
amazing
like?
looking.
Is that it? I was wondering
Yeah,
about
that's
that.
Whitby. That's actually Whitby. They filmed it, and it's the real place. And I think they got to film it, and it's barely changed so much that they just there's that wide shot where they're walking up the stairs, and it's like, no, it's just Whitby. It hadn't modernized that much by the 70s. Obviously, if they were careful, they got to just film it. Yeah, beautiful, right?
That's
you can't
wonderful.
do that in L.A.
I
Well,
know,
they have
Julia.
those-
My mind wants to say, oh, it was just, mesmerized. She was shocked, but
Right.
my heart's telling me she's just seen Lucy, hooking up with just dudes way too much. She's like, oh God, here we go again.
At it again.
Yeah.
Well, we're all capable of papering over the flaws of the people we love, right? So it's entirely possible that she could be like, "Look, I'll cover for you now and last time and next time," and that's just how we do. And
Let's just not tell mom. Yeah.
right, and that makes total sense. And it's not nearly the crazy violent sexual thing that Coppola does, right? It's nowhere near as bonkers as that. This is much more ecstatic.
And that's why, and I think some of the versions play a little bit better where they're not sisters. So in other versions, it's Mina staying, so her rich friend Lucy. So basically, Mina's a guest at Lucy's basic estate. So it's almost her duty to protect and to cover the secrets of this Lucy. I remember, I think it was the Coppola version where she's kind of going through Lucy's room and like the Kama Sutra book, falls on the floor, and they kind of giggle like little schoolgirls.
Yes.
So I kind of read it like Mina has this responsibility to protect her rich, but maybe a little flirtatious friend here, and it doesn't quite work that way as sisters.
The rules for Lucy are different than the rules for Mina because she's a different class.
That's right.
Of
that is
society
interesting
in the traditional version. Yeah.
100%.
So there is this lustfulness, and Louis Jourdan, being a Frenchman, in his interviews anyway, he plays up the notion that he thought of Dracula as a sexual creature, as a sort of generous lover, as it were, in vampirism and all this stuff. And that was something that Jourdan liked to play up when he was discussing how he approached Dracula. But what's so interesting about that is, of course, the Victorians were incredibly bizarre in their attitudes about sexuality. Victorians, Carl Sagan writes about how Victorians rejected the theory of evolution because Victorians were scandalized by the weird licentiousness of monkeys, and so therefore humans could not possibly be evolved from monkeys. That's hilarious.
You say that because Rain, we watched in 2 parts actually today, and after just the first part, Rain was commenting that it wasn't as sexy as a lot of other versions, and it was way more chaste. But then I was like, well, it's Victorian. It's also, she's like, well, it tries here and there. I'm like, well, it's British sexy, I don't know, or Victorian sexy.
It's Victorian.
She's like, yeah. just and my apologies to my British friends if I don't mean to offend anyone, but it has that very it's more rigid. We're also seeing it, a 73 version of something, so things change throughout that as well, but you don't get kind of the lascivious nature you might see in later was certainly not the Coppola Dracula. And
So
that's
Tony,
you don't get that,
Tony,
like
I just
said,
went
scene.
I just went on Twitter and hashtag British sexy is blowing up.
Nice.
We're trending.
Well done,
but also,
sir.
But also, it is what Jason's saying. It's Victorian ideals, and it's firmly set in that. So, but it's funny that it also kind of mirrors that way, and kind of how it's even shot accentuates that as well, I think.
It's so complicated because, of course, the great thing about repressed sexuality is that it comes out in weird places. It's a power under pressure, and so it's going to seep out through the seams, and it's going to show up in weird ass places. And so therefore you've got all this phallic stuff, you've got the sort of gang rapiness of the staking of the vampire women, you've got the sort of pseudo sexuality of the seduction of Dracula. All
Well-
of this is Victorian, a very Victorian writer, just kind of going nuts, throwing sexual symbolism all over the place when he doesn't want to actually write a sexual piece. And I think that's way better. I love reading a repressed work much more than a licentious work, because the repressed work shows you all kinds of nutso escape valves, and
Well,
that's
there's
kind of
also, the scene where she views everybody else, all the men in the room, as leering at her. They're
Yes.
definitely not. They're trying to attend to her and take care of her. But in her view, as she's changing into a vampire, as she's been seduced by Dracula and had her perception changed, in her mind, they're all leering and just really getting close, and they do kind of the strange warping effects and stuff like that. And that
Isn't
was
wild.
that's an interesting part of that too.
Yeah.
Where this is how men are to her at this point. And maybe it's men except for Dracula. Well, it is true, because Dracula shows up and he
shows up in
he's like, hey, I'm just normal Dracula, here to take you away from these leering weirdos.
Yeah.
preferable.
Yeah.
That what's interesting is that Dracula, Mina in Stoker says, when Dracula comes in and cuts his chest and pulls Mina towards his chest and says, I'm gonna make you my bountiful wine press, or whatever it is that he says, something like that. She's hypnotized by him. She says, I did not want to hinder him. And that's the horror. The horror is the licentiousness that Dracula brings to people. That's the cult of vampirism, is that it frees you in a negative way from the propriety of Christianity. And so that what's wild here is these two cults. To get away from sex for just a second, you've got the cult of Christianity as represented by Van Helsing. And then you've got the cult of whatever the hell Dracula is, as represented by Dracula. And they even have a drawing room moment where they just argue with one another, which I think is really
The dark messiah that he is, right? He's the shadow
Well,
version of that.
Dracula-
And he also, and I think he represents kind of, I think, to maybe a somewhat cloistered Scotsman, like Stoker was.
Irish, but yes.
Irishman, yeah, sorry. The dangers of like the Eastern morality, right? Like
Interesting.
This exotic place that he'd never been, that he'd read about in books, that they had a different morality and had different ethics and different, there's something a little bit jingoistic about a lot of I think sometimes how
I guess that's true.
Dracula's world, because you have to realize, to them, we still think of Transylvania and Romania as Eastern Europe, but to them it was practically China.
Interesting.
It had a different. It was partially Turkey. To them, it was a very different.
Thank you for bringing that up. I hadn't
Yeah.
thought about that, Jim. That's a really good point. Yes, that's so alien to me, because obviously, I don't live in England, and so and I'm not Victorian, so that's almost lost. If people have written about that, and it's hard for me to even remember, because it's such an exotic thought.
Yeah, there's a lot of xenophobia kind of thing going on there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
You were talking about like the point where Dracula and Van Helsing kind of have a theological debate. What's interesting about this version of Dracula is that he almost is proclaiming that he's an atheist. Like he doesn't seem, even though like you think of Dracula being this creature of the devil, this Dracula in this film doesn't seem to have any such
he's not worried about souls. He's not, the cross doesn't bother him, right? Or does it?
Yeah,
I'm confused.
The cross doesn't bother him. He's purely about just blood and to surviving basically the eternal life, like eternal life in corpus, not.
So does the host only bother Mina because Mina is a Christian? In other words,
No,
is
I
it her
think
line?
I get the impression I got, and from the way he plays it as well, is it's played as, look, I've been around long enough. That doesn't. I'm more powerful than that, because it affects the brides. It affects me. Like he's grown so powerful. He's taken so many lives and seen so much too, that he's beyond that, because he kind of plays it as, I might be affected. Oh no, you know what? I'm just teasing you. Like this doesn't affect me. Come on. Who do you think I am? And it's this arrogance that we went back to, is he can't help but tease all the humans and go, oh no, no, I can't do that. I'm Dracula. Like,
So let me
this
ask you
doesn't
something.
affect me.
Dracula's plan then is terrible for, like, if Dracula is this sort of Alexander the Great kind of guy who, you know, is still alive and has decided to come out of retirement and do some big ass stuff, then why isn't he like trying to like undermine Parliament? Why isn't he like killing the Queen and taking over the throne?
Well,
Like, what the hell is he doing?
yeah, but he's been around so long. This is probably we can surmise that this is a Dracula who's probably tried that at one point and gone, you know what? Court politics are boring. Parliament is boring. Like, I've done that. I've been a nobleman.
Yeah.
You could see a Dracula because he said, "Oh, it's 2,000 years. You know, you've been trying to do this."
Yeah.
So he's been around for a really long time, and he's seen a lot of things. There was probably a point where he's like, "You know what? I'm going to turn everybody into vampires. This will be great." He got bored with that.
Yeah, he has different phases. Right now, he's in his hedonist phase.
Yeah, he's just.
Oh,
I
well
mean, this is
said.
a person who goes, I guess I'll leave the castle for a while and go. I mean, who knows how many times he's actually done this?
It's a good point.
But now
That's
we're
a-
in Victorian England, so now he's got to get a solicitor and, you know, do these things by the book, because he's also, as we've kind of seen, he's willing to fit into each thing so that he doesn't jeopardize, because
Yeah.
he still can be killed, as we see. But in general, I mean, he kind of doesn't believe that he can be killed because humans are like flies or anything else, just so beneath him. But I think why he doesn't do that is basically because he's just done it. So like he's probably done bits of this across the earth for hundreds of years.
I just had a sudden thought. Wouldn't it be cool if Dracula like came to London and this were stretched out into like 2 years of episodes, and so he gets close to all these Victorian people, and maybe he becomes, I mean, honestly, he could become Sherlock Holmes. He could be like, you know, solving crimes and stuff, and then eventually gets around to murdering everybody and trying to take over. That would be actually kind of cool if you think that he's turned a new leaf, but he's actually just biding his time. And
well, I mean, he could do that and then also pull the just when I thought I was out, they brought me back in. Now I'm back to killing people. It always turns out like I tried a bunch of times to be good, and every few centuries I fit in with whatever, and then, you know, that's boring, and so it's back to just
what's the one? Satanic Rites. Satanic Rites of Dracula. He is super wealthy and living in London, and he has decided that he's gonna like smuggle a plague thing that'll kill a bunch of people and make vampires and stuff. I'm a little vague on his big plan, but it's you know, it's complicated and involves, you know, a biological weapon. The problem with Dracula is that the only way for him to be super big is he becomes basically a James Bond villain, you know. And Stoker keeps it personal and keeps it, you know, very sort of, that's what makes it more horror than thriller, is that he keeps it personal. He keeps it to this family. And, you know, I know, Drew, I know that you're into like classic vampire stories. In a sense, this is a very kind of a classic idea of a vampire, in that he is a thing that is slowly eating its way through one family. You know, he's killed a mom, and now he's going to kill one of the sisters, and, you know, like a plague in a sense.
Like typhus, yeah, I was going to say.
It's that folklore stuff that's in the original Dracula, and, you know, modern vampire movies don't like to play with this stuff.
I wonder why that is.
I think it's because it's, you know, it's the desire to go bigger, I think. You know, go big or go home. But I think when you get down to it, like if you're trying to make something scary, and I disagree, like, you know, often, I actually just said this in an article I wrote, if people will say like, oh, vampires can't be scary, and I'm like, well, if you do it like Blade, which is a movie I still like, but if you do it like Blade, no, it's not going to be scary.
It's exciting, right?
It's exciting, it's thrilling, and there's nothing wrong with that. Right. But if you do it like, say, Salem's Lot, you know, like where like the heroes are very vulnerable still, I think there's something that can be quite terrifying about that, because you're talking about something that is essentially can be seen as a metaphor for disease,
Yeah,
and people wasting away and grief and all the things. And you can still have all the high adventure stuff in there, because Dracula certainly is at times a high adventure story. And I think that, this particular version does a lot of that stuff very well, but it just really boils down to what you want to emphasize.
I think 30 Days of Night is pretty scary still. I don't know if anybody's like, oh, vampires can't be scary. Like, I thought that was pretty good. I don't know.
That's absolutely right.
I think it's a measure about how much you care about the human beings Dracula is coming for. And just like any villain, his status depends on the status of his protagonist or antagonist, or whichever way you want to see it. And the more you care about it, and by keeping it very localized with, again, this one group of people, Mina, Lucy, Van Helsing, Quincy, we get to know these people, we get to care about them, we want them to be okay. And this diabolical thing that is coming for them, again, like a disease that is unstoppable, that you can't, and it just rips through everyone you know and takes people you love away from them. That's what makes the drama big, and it can be soap opera-y, if it runs to its furthest end. But it's what makes us hold on for 2.5 hours of watching.
and you know me, I'm all for the soap opera stuff, actually, and that was what I love about Salem's Lot, is just how meandering. So it's so funny. That sounds so unfair of me to say, when earlier I said, hey, I would have cut an hour out of this. So I don't know how to square those. I apologize that I can't make sense out of that. But
next time when I say watch over 2 nights,
yes.
No, we did. We watched it over 2 nights and then broke it up like 5 times during
Maybe
that
the thing
time.
is, we didn't do
fair
a good enough job of dedicating our time to watching it. So I want to turn this towards, where does this rank? If this is not
before
your
we
favorite,
do that, I feel like we were all ragging on it during the opening of the thing. I think we have to take a moment to talk about Quincy's accent.
Rootin' Tootin' Quincy.
Yeah.
Just, oh my word.
So
Rain was even in on, like, what? She's
My
living.
favorite way of describing it was the Tony messages. So Quincy's accent is a choice. It just made me laugh so hard. I was like, that is a choice that I wish he had not made, for sure.
So what I don't understand about this is he is a composite character of Quincy Morris and Arthur Homewood. Quincy is, of course, a Texan, and this guy's trying to do a Southern drawl. But Arthur Homewood is an English lord. Like, if you couldn't get an actor that could do the correct accent, why make the composite character English?
So I think there's still the mystique of a Texan adventurer.
There sure is.
And in full defense, the number of terrible British accents that Americans have foisted upon the world, my friends from England will tell me all the time, like, why is this person 3 different
Why is Jonathan
areas?
Harker played by Keanu Reeves?
Or why is this accent like 5 different accents from all over? So not that we can't take our lumps for that, right? Like,
sure.
Yes. It's frustrating when so many of my British friends, how often this happens. However, being from Texas, whew, boy, is that Quincy just... Oh man, it is something. It is painful.
It's actually comical. Like I know, Jason, I know you hate this phrase, but it took me out of it every time I started talking, because I would start laughing.
Oh no!
As soon as you started talking,
it has nothing whatever to do with the Texas accent. Nothing.
No.
It has everything to do, I think, with Foghorn Leghorn. I think
I said the only way it could. The only way it could be.
Hey there, little lady.
I wish he would have just leaned in and just been Yosemite Sam.
Yes.
Like, at least that would have been like, I'm rootin' tootin' from Texas.
So you nailed it. Foghorn Leghorn.
Dracula.
It's totally Foghorn Leghorn. Like,
it was Foghorn Leghorn with the mustache of the Pringles guy from the.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And
gosh.
I mean, I'm not an actor starring in in this movie. So what the hell do I know about what it takes? But
You could
boy,
do a better
I
Texas
just
accent, though. I guarantee you that.
yeah, but boy, is you want to go like, look, man, you want somebody to take him aside and go just, or at least watch some westerns, even if that's not technically Texas. Like,
Yeah.
come on, Quincy. It shouldn't make you laugh. And maybe if you don't hear those accents, because I run into the same thing where there's a lot of accents I mean, it's hard to discern, I think. If, or like I'll
Well,
ask
and
my friends,
Dallas hadn't come out yet, so it's not like
yeah,
they're watching it.
I'll ask this a friend of mine. I asked a friend of mine from Japan, like, hey, I saw in this article or in this series, somebody said, oh, that person's really country, but I don't know enough Japanese to really pick up on what the nuances are. And so the same thing with the South. Like, there's a large, there's Alabama, Mississippi, there's Louisiana, and then down into like where it's closer to New Orleans, where it's Cajun, Georgia. There's a lot. All of that's different than Texas, right?
Yeah.
So I can see, if you're not spending a lot of time trying to pick it up, but
Doing
how
a
you
Gone with
land
the
how you
Wind
landed
thing.
this one was
Yeah,
Yeah.
just at least do a Gone with the Wind impression if you're gonna.
yeah. Well, I think it was sort of that, but just not.
Frankly, Dracula, damn.
Yeah, I think it almost was that, and that may have been what, but none of his from the South is remotely Texas, and that's the real. But again, I think that the reason they kept it that, and he went full bore, was it's cool in the realm of having an adventure.
Yes, I agree.
Posse.
It's flavor.
To have like, this guy's from, not only is he from America, but he's from Texas.
Yes,
like,
but he doesn't have his Bowie knife like in the book.
No.
Like,
oh right,
Stoker
right.
goes even more. Like, the guy literally carries a Bowie knife.
Sure.
And that which
I mean,
or
why
is it
wouldn't
Bowie
you?
knife? Forgive me,
mean,
I don't remember how to pronounce that. Is it Bowie knife or Bowie?
Bowie knife.
Bowie
I
knife.
mean,
Yeah, it's not David Bowie.
right.
I am a Texan and I don't know how to pronounce.
Although I would like to
Bowie
see
knife.
what a David Bowie knife would be.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, it would
Elegant.
have the lightning bolt thing on it. That I know.
Yeah.
Like,
But
it's got to have the on the blade, totally a lightning
bling.
bolt. Like,
Yeah.
But I mean, I was saying about how, like, the villain's measured by the power of his opponents. I think having this big, tough Texan guy who Dracula is still an imposing opponent.
Yeah,
to
right.
This guy, more than the ascetic British solicitor Jonathan Harker. Of course, Dracula's
Right.
intimidated at that guy, right? But like that's like your accountant or something. But like Dracula being a fearsome opponent to this incredibly robust American who's fought in battles and all sorts of things, that ups the terror of Dracula, because holy
a really
crap,
good
like,
point.
even the Texan
And
guy
he can
can't
take-
handle him, right?
And in here, you could take a shot too.
Yes.
Like, he's heroic. It's just bad because, especially being from Texas, his heroic nature and his daring do is undermined every time he speaks.
I think it's
That's
funny.
tough.
British Texan.
That's tough.
Yeah.
The movies really struggle, and this is an interesting thing that I've never seen a Dracula script that tries to figure out how to work this. The movies struggle with giving strength back to Jonathan Harker. The book,
Mhm.
Harker becomes part of the Scooby Gang and they go kill some vampires. And I guess that's going on here. But the problem is having Harker getting his ass beat so badly in the first like third of the book and I guess the movie, and essentially losing his wife to this much more suave, better classed foreigner. Harker never really recovers from that. And if I think you'd have to even create scenes that aren't even here to really be able to come up with it, some sort of a true recovery of Harker that
Right.
we don't see, because we don't ever get a feel for exactly why Mina sticks with Harker.
I mean, it would be interesting. It would be interesting, and again, not to do too much whataboutism, but you could, if you had a Harker who becomes just so set on bitterness and revenge that even Van Helsing has to go like, "Whoa, man, pull it back." that would be fascinating. But I think I think you're correct in that it's tough to recover, because even in this one, he's like, "Well, when I did finally break free and get the hell out of Dracula's castle, I also spent weeks in the hospital."
Yes.
And, his fiance has to come take care of him. And he was, rather beat up and anemic even then, like, oh, I'm still kind of weak.
Yes.
And so it's hard to get him back into the mix again, especially when you got these adventurer guys. You got super smart Van Helsing, and in this one they also give Dr. Seward way more
Yes.
to do.
So
And
yeah,
I thought that was really interesting.
well, two things about Dr. Stewart. Number one is that they alluded at the beginning to Lucy having him as a suitor, but they don't really give much to that later because once she chooses,
It's already dropped. She's
the
chosen
other guy,
Lord,
yeah.
Dr.
But
Lord
also, I was
Godalming
going
or
to
whatever
say
his
that
name
it's
is.
hilarious that when Jonathan is in hospital, he says to Mina, "Hey, Jonathan's in the hospital," and she's like, "Oh, I should go to him." "Yep, already got you the ticket. You're on the next train or whatever." And I'm like, "Wow, that was presumptuous of him."
Yes.
Like, no. Obviously, you should be going. We already got you the ticket. Oh, that was
Yeah.
pretty
No,
funny.
that's
Well, I just thought I read that more as like, I'm a family friend. You should totally, like, now that he's back, that's the right thing to do. That's how I
Right.
read it.
I still think it was presumptuous.
Like,
But yeah, I feel you.
you're a pest. We need to get you married AStat and get out of here.
Yeah.
Go find a man.
Yeah, go
The,
build your own house so I can have Lucy to myself, right?
Right.
Well,
Exactly.
right, because it's Dr. Seward who in this one is just like in the book one of the suitors, and as
One of the
Jim
suitors, yeah.
pointed out, they've eliminated one and turned Lord Godalming into a version of Quincy. So Quincy and Lord Godalming are one character, but which bends my brain all the time because I keep.
Seward gets a little bit of Arthur too. They kind of split him a bit.
Yeah, that's
Like you
true.
said, he gets more assertive. Yeah.
But gosh, what was I thinking here? Oh, yeah. I mean, I was thinking about the Harker Mina thing, and it's complicated. This one does it fairly well, but also remember in the 1992 one, Mina's like way the hell over on the other side of the seesaw, where she's in love with Dracula, and so now you've got a completely emasculated Harker who is, just sort of begrudgingly around trying to rescue Mina. This is
Well,
just
and Renfield is trying to rescue her,
right.
which I thought
So
was interesting.
I think this is a problem in the novel, and it's not a problem with the novel. I think the novel does what it does deliberately. It's a problem in the novel. It's not a problem that any of the adaptations have chosen to solve. Harker is damaged when he encounters Dracula. He remains damaged forever. That's just fascinating to me.
Yeah. He's a victim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Renfield,
And
by the way,
again, it is.
ahead.
Sorry, Julia. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say we haven't talked really about that much about Renfield, but you can finish what you're saying.
Oh yeah. Well, again, it kind of works as Dracula just ripping through things.
yeah,
Like,
Mhm.
Harker is useful until he's not, and
Right.
that's also his point. It's like, hey, don't do all kinds of lady vampire things to him until such time as I tell you, like, yeah, just go ahead. I don't care about him anymore.
right.
And Dracula fully expects him to never leave the castle. Like, that's it. He's called Harker there. That's what he does. And for him, to his credit, for him to even escape that is fairly heroic. But by
Yes.
that time, he's just that Dracula's worked through him, so it would be hard for him to recover. And
Yes.
that's part of the evil, right? Like, that's
Well said. Yeah.
humans are garbage, or at best toys.
Yeah, toys, exactly, because he lets Jonathan escape. I mean, he doesn't try to keep him once Jonathan has gotten to the level where they sleep in their boxes. He lets him escape, and then he's like, "Oh, I'll catch you later," literally.
Yeah, let me drive you to your
I'll pick you up
house.
in a carriage and drop you
Yeah.
off at your house.
It is so funny. Yeah, Dracula ultimately is done in just by his inability to envision that people will be able to defeat him, which is interesting. But
in a more modern setting, he would roll, you would see the window open in a cab, and Dracula would just slowly roll the window up as Harker goes, what? And again, people would just go, "Are you seeing Draculas everywhere? Are you?"
yeah,
Like, no, the
I know,
cabbie was
I've always-
Dracula.
I've always kind of enjoyed the fact that Harker is so neutered. And to me, it would feel like such a common trope to have the male love interest come in and save the day. But if you kind of neuter your leading man here, now all the weight and all of basically the future of this little village of folks depends on this weird Van Helsing character.
that's
I
right.
just find that
Right.
so interesting.
Well, and that's why I think, honestly, I firmly believe, I think Van Helsing's a critical character, but I think Mina is actually the hero of Dracula.
Mhm.
Dracula very quickly becomes a revenge story of Mina trying to end the thing that ruined her boyfriend and her best friend. I think she becomes incredibly important in the second half of it, and she's also the key to his end too. So Harker's demise lets Mina step forward and become the heroine.
Right.
That's
No,
true.
I totally agree.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. And because you're right, if you had a much more strength, it's in a sense it's Mina's story, and Harker, it's not so much Harker's story anymore. But again, this is the perverseness of Stoker, because I gotta say, from a Victorian perspective, that is a perverse way to write your book. That's a weird ass way to make it go. Is to have Harker become essentially emasculated, and his wife have to sort of step up and
Well,
become
and
his
that's why
rescuer.
I wanted to get back to Renfield, because to me,
Yeah.
his character's evolution is really interesting in this picture, because he's not just the servant who wants to please his master. He's like tortured soul. He's like, wait a minute, I didn't mean to do this, and this is bad. Now I'm seeing that
Yeah.
this is bad, and I kind of want to save my soul. Like, he is like more the Christian. I kind of want to save my soul, and I don't want Mina to go this route either. And so it's a really I thought and I thought the performance was brilliant. So I just thought that was worth mentioning, because at that point when he's at the yard at the end, or toward the end, where he's like, I need to get out of here, I need to stop this, and then he basically kills himself and is like, I just want to go to God. That was a really impressive and moving story.
That's
Yeah.
what I
And it
always
also-
loved about. I'm sorry. Get Tony.
No, it also changes the way he's treated in the institution, and the way he is institutionalized in this changes a lot of the portrayals of Renfield from this that guy's crazy, and look how crazy he is.
He's eating flies.
And he's just doing all this stuff, and he almost gets a redemption story.
Yeah.
But also he's treated in some ways even more humanely at times than he is in other movies and other media.
For sure.
But his realization as he's going along, like, because at first we do see him as kind of the typical Renfield that you see. Hey, I'm gonna, I just have to have flies. I have to have this. I have, eventually I have to have blood.
Right.
But as he realizes Dracula's end game and how he fits in and how he's been a pawn, that change, and how when other people, it starts to change when he sees, oh wait, it's not just me. There's other people affected by this.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we see him go, yes, more people for Dracula. This is great. or at least in the kind of unhinged way that he is, or he's like, well, the master must know. So the more people involved, this is his bidding.
Yeah.
We see that change in his demeanor and his performance, that wait, maybe I'm just now realizing, I'm becoming more lucid and realizing that this isn't how this should be. And maybe he doesn't even refer to him as much as the master. He doesn't go back to that as much. And I thought that was really interesting. I loved his performance is amazing.
Yeah.
He
is.
It
He's
was a
very
welcome
good.
change. I like a lot of the other Renfields, and I think it's a fascinating character. And changing it in this way is really interesting. It also, it's not in the kind of a more dungeon-like institution,
Right.
that we normally see.
It's a fairly liberal, and I don't know jack about where institutions like this were in the Victorian era, but it's a fairly sort of progressive, hey, come and work in the garden, we want to get to know you kind of institution that we don't usually see in these movies. And I'm
Right.
not saying jack about like reality. I don't know. I haven't.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it was. I always think of it
Probably
as
not
closer
great,
what
to
we've
be
seen
honest
in
with
other
you.
movies.
Yeah.
But I thought the choices that they made and changing him from typically we see a very unhinged.
Who's your
Renfield.
favorite Renfield? Like, this is a nice one, but like, who's I mean, this could be your favorite, but I mean, I want to hear from you guys. Who's your favorite Renfield out there?
I know Scott.
I would bet. Yeah.
No, I mean, again, I always go to Dwight Fry, and really his portrayal of somebody who is just struggling
Yeah.
with every ounce of energy in his body, fighting for sanity. To
He's
me,
got that
is like
great voice too.
I mean, right, I know, but just unmatched. Just you feel he's such a pathetic and lost soul that he is trying to do good. He's trying to save Mina, and in every single day, this reality and his sanity is being is drawn from him, like a Dracula sucking blood from a victim. But easy. I mean, that's an easy one for me. That's absolutely Dwight Fry.
I love Dwight Fry. I'm a huge fan of Tom Waits' performance in the '92 thing. I think he captures the line is in the film and in the book that he's not a madman, he's a sane man fighting for his soul. But this actor, this was a new experience for me, and I was blown away by his performance, and also the way that he's doing this. They take away something from his character. They take away the backstory that he was previously sent to Castle Dracula and came back and went crazy. So Harker in the Stoker novel, Harker's the second attempt. They think that
that's
Renfield
funny.
went
I had
and,
forgotten
what
exactly was his backstory.
Yeah, they thought the guy just had a nervous breakdown and came back and they had to be put in an institution and stuff. It turns out that Dracula, we think, drove him crazy and sent him back as his kind of missionary. And it's probably how he learned about Carfax Abbey, and it's how it's part of his whole game plan to get to England. The actor here, the character here, doesn't have that backstory anymore. So he just happens to be a dude in an asylum. And yet, I think because we know the story well enough, we get that he interacts with Dracula, right?
Yeah, but they do talk about his breakdown. So it's more, I think it's kind of sort of there, but they just decided, well, we're not gonna. Maybe they thought it was too on the nose. I don't know, but they kind of allude to it
already. Okay.
Yeah,
exactly. Yes.
There's an extra 75 minutes that's just Renfield's backstory somewhere on the cutting room floor.
But that would explain it if they had built in the Renfield backstory. That Dracula, by the time Haka, goes to Castle Dracula, Dracula's already been schooled by this, the man Renfield, who was sent back insane. In Dracula 31, to me, it seems pretty clear that Dracula has not spoken to another human being in God knows how long, centuries, right? I mean, to me, this Dracula here feels like somebody who has at least interacted with, with the human population. To me, that's why I never felt the weight of his, his age. I didn't feel the centuries on this Dracula,
That is interesting. I hadn't thinking about Renfield. It's so difficult to make this a super interesting character because he's stuck in this cell, and I do love, Dwight Fry goes down in our cultural consciousness. I mean, those of us who grew up with Bill Cosby's, and I know that Bill Cosby's problematic now, so I apologize. But those of us who were watching comedy in the 80s, Bill Cosby loved to do that Dwight Fry impression. It was like it's such a recognizable laugh, and I like Klaus Kinski in the 1969-70 Dracula. That's pretty cool. But this is a good one. This does seem like a very human one. So that was really neat. Yeah, and Scott, it's an excellent point. The whole that I'd never really thought about, that Dracula's exposure to Renfield could have helped him to humanize himself for future victims. I've never thought about that before, and
that might have been like his first semester in Human 101.
Isn't that interesting? What an interesting idea that is. There's also backstory for Van Helsing in the book. Van Helsing has backstory too. He has like a dead son, and he has a madman wife, and there's he's been victimized by supernatural forces. He's been chewed up and spat out already a bunch by the time he shows up, and which ends.
Most of the film versions don't really go into that.
Right.
Tends to be more mysterious than that in the movie versions.
Which is
that's something I know nothing about, Jason and Drew. Can you be not to go on this tangent? Can you, just for my own pleasure, what was some of the other battles that like the Van Helsing?
No, it's super duper vague. So I apologize, but it's super duper vague. He just has some and he's written in this weird accent that Stoker plays up. So it's difficult to tell what the hell he's talking about.
I think that's one of the reasons why I like the one here is that it the way he speaks gels very much with the way Stoker writes him.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Even his, his occasional struggle with English, because jam like
I
jam?
love that so much.
And it's just like little bits like that where he's
like,
he's
okay.
extremely learned man who still has the foibles of sure, okay, he asks these questions, but it's always very pointed, and those little bits really were really excellent.
And we need that little bit of humor in there. We need it so badly because the thing cannot be a monotone. We need that tiny bit of his anticness. Just helps so much, and his sweetness too.
Yeah,
and especially since it's also in a very tense moment where he's teaching them like vampire extermination 101.
Yeah.
And still trying to make sure that he doesn't blow their minds with here's all the other supernatural crap I've dealt with. Like, no, just rub, it's cool. Garlic has a lot of there's a lot of reasons why you would do this. Just don't worry about it. It's cool.
There's a
all
thing
that's great.
To answer Scott's question. I was just looking this up because I couldn't remember. Leonard Wolf has his annotated Dracula, and so Van Helsing refers to that he had a son who died who reminds him very much of Arthur Holmwood, and so that's why he has an affection for Arthur Holmwood. And he has a wife who is dead to me, but alive by the church's law, though no wits all gone. Even I, who am faithful husband to this now no wife. So he has a wife at home who is mad, and so so he's beset by tragedy, and he walks the earth. It's unclear how his son died, but so. Unfortunately, so you imagine, maybe it was another demonic, who knows, so
the scene with Mina and Van Helsing, that kind of extended travel, I thought was really interesting. I hadn't seen that much of. And also they downplay the Demeter by a lot.
Yes.
Like usually that's a huge dealio, but in this one they're like, hey, I think I see a ship. Oh, here's a scene or two. Bloop, bloop. Oh, yep.
But it's still there. They still wreck the ship and everything. Do you remember Frank Langella shows up in the 1979 one wrapped in a fur? Like
yeah.
Like it's so silly. He's just sort of there on the beach. Anyway.
When Van Helsing and Mina have an extended travel time.
Yeah.
Like that whole adventure part is, I haven't really seen that much. Usually by now we're just racing towards Dracula. Like there's no side trip. But also I like how he knows kind of what's going to happen and goes along with it just to see what's going to.
This is the part where in any of the movies it's tracking more or less closely with the book. Dracula has given up on his plan to do whatever it was that he did on vacation in London, and so he's racing back to Castle Dracula, and the heroes are also racing back to Castle Dracula.
Right.
And,
But this one takes us on a side trip. Mina and Van Helsing stay overnight and have a whole encounter with the brides. And like that whole thing, you don't really see that. That's one of the things in this one that...
In the book, they split up because the guys on horseback are trying to cut him off because he takes a boat and they somehow ride horses from England. I'm not sure how that works out, but no, it becomes a chase scene. It's great. And you're right. Dracula, like you said, Jason, like Dracula had this perfect plan and he worked on it for years and he seduced Renfield and he done this thing and he gets there. And how long is he in England? Like a week. And it just goes to hell. And he's like,
it goes to hell. Right. It falls apart. And he's like,
well, this didn't work. I'm going back.
Yeah.
And he's going to try it again later, I guess.
But don't burn your boxes.
That's a flaw, to be honest with you.
Well, he could try it again later. He could get 100 years and
he'll wait it out.
Recycle the whole plan.
I
this
love
time he
that
can take a
in
plane.
In the Netflix one, actually, he manages to get wrecked in the Demeter, and he stays underground for 100 years, like underwater. He just sort of it's just an accident, and because he's immortal, it doesn't matter. So he literally just gets sunk, which was kind of hilarious. And people, by the way, have asked us to talk about the Netflix series, and we may well get to it. At this rate, it may be another year or so before we get to it, but I'm sure eventually. We will.
Speaking of year or two, Scott and Jim, we need to schedule the other Monster Mash movies at some point. I know it's been a pain to schedule everything. I mean, I have my own crazy schedule and everything, but sometime soon, I'm totally down with figuring out when to do that.
Can I ask you, how long have you guys been doing the Borgo Pass now?
We started at the beginning of the year, right, Scott?
Yeah, early January started putting together, threw
Wow.
us some
20
ideas, and
25 episodes.
what's
Cool.
that, buddy?
Or he's like 25 episodes out now.
We're about 25. Yeah, nowhere close to the 360.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Jesus, you guys.
But I
No,
gotta
it's doing a
say, yeah,
wonderful job.
Borgo Pass came together extremely quickly, and I think we're very blessed to just come together and be very like-minded and humble and just wanting to collaborate and have fun. And I mean, literally, it happened real quick.
I'm glad. That's wonderful. It sounds good, and I love what you've been focusing on. That's really been a wonderful. I
Yeah,
don't
the
know,
70-minute films, not the 2.5 hours. It's
Right,
kind of
right.
like, this is a long movie. We're not used to this anymore.
Yeah. So I did want to mention one of the things I always do with a movie like this, like Dracula, is it's just like, so I have a child. We watch Little Women, every version of Little Women that comes out, and I'll watch every version of Jane Eyre that gets made, and it's fun with movies like books like this that keep getting adapted over and over again, or Hamlet. And to go in sort of with a checklist and just see and just check off the things as they go. It's like, oh, look, there's Van Helsing. But does he have crucifixes or does he use hosts? Does Dracula talk to Van Helsing? Does Dracula hang out in the drawing room or not? It's fun to see each of these things sort of ticked off and done in their own way. And it doesn't bother me at all. I can't imagine a universe where I'd go, oh, I don't want to watch another Dracula, because I just love seeing all these different choices over and over again.
I mean, with all the movies, Jason, I mean, obviously you went on to do your own line of Van Helsing, young Van Helsing novels.
Sure.
Was there something in the storylines that you felt like you could just fill a void, like there's something that you really, really wanted to touch on that hadn't been touched in movies yet? Because I feel, they said, we've talked about it before, so many Dracula movies, and most of them have the same tropes.
That's a really good question. I really, from my own art, I have no idea. I don't know the answer to that question.
Fair enough.
I've never really thought about it, so I'd have to give that some thought. I really wanted to play up, setting aside the Alex Van Helsing novels. For me, what made me fall in love with all this was when I was researching for the sort of Dracula comics that the Alex Van Helsing novels are spun off from. And in those, I really wanted to get into the powers of Dracula, and then what it would take to be a family that was dedicated to fighting him. And I thought that the movies had just completely ignored half the shit that Van Helsing has to say about Dracula. Chapter 18 of Dracula has so much just about Dracula as a being and as a powerful being. And Van Helsing gives you just a whole sort of recipe. Like he says, for instance, boy, you want to get out of jail free card? He says that Dracula's powers are growing and changing as he gets older. That's
Yeah, right.
Well, we see that here too, because he actually just kind of goes, look, man, all that religious stuff doesn't work on me anymore.
Doesn't work on me anymore. That's
Like,
fascinating.
I'm so far past that, because
Should have caught me in 1612, but not.
Even in Latin, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
so
that's
I had a
quaint.
scene in sort of Dracula where the demons that there are some demons that are looking for a MacGuffin and they tear Dracula apart looking for it, and they turn him into just a brain, and they use his brain to try to find the MacGuffin. But they throw the brain away when they've got what they want, and the brain
I could have
unfortunately
told him
lands
that
near
was not smart.
the brain. Yeah, you're right. They should have known better. The brain lands near some blood, and he just rebuilds himself, and then goes after them.
Nice.
And so,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that and the Dracula container tube were something we talked through whenever we were like riding to Acon, I think, or something.
such a
like,
crazy, nutso idea. A friend of mine loved the idea of Dracula's brain having like the ability to wander around and get blood for itself. So that he actually drew a picture of Dracula's brain with a sword swinging on a rope.
Nice.
it's a very
Anyway.
Cartesian idea.
It was
Dracula.
nutso, truly nutso. Anyway, but thank you for asking, Seth. That was sweet. Nobody's read my Dracula. It's like 20 years ago that we wrote that shit. So anyway,
I'm checking it out now. Wow.
that's
That's awesome. I love
Good
the brain. I love the brain idea.
Good
no,
luck.
but I do love. I love the. I'm working on something right now that is sort of about the gods madmen, the what Helsing calls them, and it's that they've formed this group now and they've defeated Dracula at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Spoilers. And it's like, well, now what do we go after, right? Because now we have a very unique skill set that seems like it would be of certain value to the world, and maybe there's
I love
a
that.
different direction we can take it into. So yeah,
I love that.
Well, I
do
want to
good,
hear
by the
more
way,
about this heavy metal thing because I think I probably have some,
Oh,
skin in the
okay.
game on
I like
that.
I'm forever not allowed to talk about things publicly. Tony, I'll follow you up with you on that in message and let you know what's going on with that. Your brain's gonna melt.
Oh man. Well, if you ever need consulting or anything, you hit me up. Because like I said, like a lot, there's stuff in sort of Dracula where just Jason and I driving or hanging out somewhere, and I go, "Hey, Jason, not for nothing, but what about this?" And he goes,
Yeah.
"Can I have that?" And I go, "Oh hell yeah!" I haven't been able to turn script doctoring into a paid
that's a
position.
That's a rare atmosphere career right there. Trust me, I'd love to as well because that's good business, man.
But I've had more than a couple friends who go, "Hey, so take this apart, put it back together, if you don't mind, and we'll just talk it out." And then they go, "Oh man, thanks." And I
Absolutely.
I just talking story and working shit out. So
Well, Tony,
Thank
that's
God.
why you're the Baron. That's why you're the Baron of positivity and not the Baron of profitability.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I would like profitability would be nice as far as writing goes, but
A little bit of that.
that's not what I don't know.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Oh, I've known that, Tony. I've known that ever since you and I came up with lingerie battle cattle in college.
Did you say battle cattle?
Lingerie battle cattle. Yeah.
Yeah. It just was the most ridiculous pseudo anime thing that could be.
I like that. It
that-
sounds
oh,
like
so
something.
Jim,
that was the
we-
age of Image Comics. So there were
Yeah.
heavily armed cattle with wearing lingerie.
That does tie. We should probably get back to the actual discussion, but there's a book called Schoolgirl Milky Crisis, and it's about anime, but it's also the guy who wrote it. Drawing a blank on the name, but is it Matt All? I can't remember. But basically, that was his when somebody needed a ridiculous title that was over the top and just seemed like, well, that would probably be a cartoon. That would probably be something from Japan. That was his go-to.
Yeah.
This sounds ridiculous, yet real enough. Was Schoolgirl Milky Crisis.
That's just ridiculous enough.
Yeah.
All right. We had better get our final thoughts
Yeah.
because I know that we have created an episode of this podcast that is nearly as long as this movie, and that's shocking.
I mean, that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but
Absolutely.
this was a long
Welcome.
movie, so.
But it's all good. It's all good. All right. So I want to get our final thoughts. And the order was Jim, Drew, Julia, Scott, and Tony, and then I'll go. So Jim, and by the way, I should mention that you have a vampire novella anyway coming out from Castle Bridge.
I do, from some amazing publisher.
Yeah, in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, in like
So-
2 weeks. It's incredible.
Yeah,
I'm
plug
super-
that shit at the
Super
end.
excited
Yeah.
about that. But anyway, final thoughts. Count Dracula, 1977.
Well, I think that just like vampires, and Jason and I are coming out with a book called that I wrote called Bloodsucker City, and it's coming out November 2nd, and it's available for pre-order on Amazon. So there's my plug. Just like vampires, I think vampires are a mutable myth that is so versatile. It can be a metaphor for anything. It can be a metaphor for sex. It can be a metaphor for death. It can be a metaphor for everything, and just for unrequited love. Like Stoker had a girl that he loved and that wouldn't marry him early on, and I think that influenced a lot of this kind of cuckold thing that goes on with Harker in the story.
I always say it's a metaphor for addiction.
Yeah, or addiction. Like I said, it's so universal, and I think it's why the creature has such a longevity in our culture. Dracula is a rarefied version of that, and Dracula himself can be anything. He can be this plague rat, like in Nosferatu, or he can be this dark messiah. And I think every iteration that we see of Dracula or read of Dracula or anything is just has to find its own unique way of portraying that. And whether successful or not, or whether all the parts work or something like that, I think this is a wonderful presentation with very distracting music. We never really got into music, but I do think the music is possibly the worst part of this whole. It is sometimes so jarring and oh my gosh, get me out of there. But in any case, it's of the era. But I think overall, like I said in the beginning of the thing, this is a super faithful, almost verbatim in moments, a version of the story. And I think if on Borgo Pass we talk a lot about the long shadow of some of these films and their influence in latter years. I think if you watch this, I think you see a heck of a lot of the John Badham, Frank Langella version of Dracula in this. You know, like I think it inherited a lot of things from it, and then also intentionally steered away from certain things in the same way. I think in the death scene, I think you see a ton of the Coppola. I think Coppola really there's no doubt in my mind Coppola watched Lucy's deathbed scenes in this movie when he directed Sadie, I think it's her name, Sadie Frost, in his version in '92. There's incredible similarities, and I think, you know, great artist deal that from the best. That's how it goes. I just think overall this is an incredibly, we've said it before, this is an incredibly British version of this story, of a British story. So that's fair. I'm glad it exists. I'm glad that I would have never probably watched this if not for you guys inviting me over for this episode of the show, and I'm thankful I have. And I think it's worth the 2.5 hours for anybody out there to give it a shot. I think it hits far more than a myth.
Wonderful. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, I can't remember which way we went next. Drew. Yes, Drew. Final thoughts.
I think that this is a wonderful adaptation. Jason, you kept kind of almost asking, and I feel like I was one of the people guilty of cutting you off, which is, where does this sit in my favorite versions of Dracula? I don't know, you know, if I have like a numerical place that I would, but it's in the running. I think this is a really good version, and it's entertaining enough that I've watched it twice in the last few months. And, you know, I'm hoping that it's not available. The Blu-ray they put out a couple of years ago is already out of stock, but I'm hoping that some, you know, like maybe Shout Factory would put another version out, because I would buy this in a heartbeat. I just really enjoyed it. You know, glad that we were able to bring over the Borgo Pass boys for this
Absolutely
appropriate discussion
for something that includes the Borgo Pass. Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Yeah.
By the way, I gotta say, guys, that is the coolest darn title for a podcast ever. That is just it's
That was
really
all.
nice.
That was all Scott.
That's great.
We
No.
came up with one title. We were like, we should discuss the title, and Scott said, "How about Borgo Pass?" And I was like, "Well, that was easy." we moved on to other things. It was great.
Thank you, Drew.
That is
Julia.
not how it went with us, but that's okay.
Really?
Oh no, we have a first year under a whole other name.
A whole other
So
name.
definitely-
Oh, yeah,
Dracula, so Jason Bradley, you know, my guitarist in Deserts of Mars, was like, I've been starting it from the beginning, so I'm listening to Castle Dracula podcast episodes, and I'm like,
Oh my
oh yeah, but he's the OG there now.
Yeah,
Oh
that's
my
awesome.
goodness. Wow.
Well, I started out saying at the beginning about the effects, and we didn't really talk about the effects. But I think that yeah, some of the animation is cool. Some of the animation is really hokey, you know, with Dracula kind of being weirdly red and white or whatever it is. But I liked it a few times. But like I say, I just want to come back to the smoke machines, because I just really thought that was the coolest thing. The mist coming like a curtain under the door, and just kind of the way it would just flow around, and then the effect of Dracula being killed ? At the end, you know, when they kill him in the cut off his head, I guess, in the no, he just stabs him. I love that with everybody else he has to use a hammer with the stake, but with Dracula he's like, no, I hate this guy. He's just like brute force stakes him. And then and then like it just explodes in like smoke, and it's so strong that it's like a hurricane or a tornado, and everybody's just pushed over. I thought that was great. So that stuff was really interesting, in addition to what we've already talked about. But yeah, I think it was enjoyable, and I mean, I've already said I would cut a lot of the stuff out. There's a lot that moves very slowly, but there's a lot of good stuff here, and it's a very enjoyable watch.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Scott, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest compliment I can give is, you know, clearly the director's producers, artists loved this work, and it shows,
Mm.
and I love it too. So it's a great collaboration of me as the watcher and these folks putting out this art. I had a great time, and again, I'd never seen this until was invited on to Castle of Horror to do this. So again, just so thankful to be exposed to something I'd never seen before, and just such an honor to join everybody here. So thank you again.
That's very kind of you. That's really kind, and I know that we all have a tendency to gab so much that I hope that we've given you enough time to express yourself, you and Jim. We are hard to have a party with because we just jabber and jabber and jabber. By the way, I have a question I want to ask before I turn to Tony, and it's about the film here. And Tony, you can maybe start answering this. But if we all got mad at John Badham because when he re-released Dracula on DVD, he sucked all the reds out and he recolor timed the whole movie. And then on Blu-ray, he reversed himself, and so you can get either one. You can get the blue one or the red one, because the original 1970s release, theatrical release, was very rich in red and yellow, and so you can get either one. This thing is so video, right? And I'm wondering if you could use a special effect to filmatize it to make it look more like a theatrical film. Would you, or would that feel like
No.
cheating? Would it feel like perverting?
I mean,
a work.
So several things. I think that it's how it was done. And actually the first half is way more film.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't. I mean, it's part of BBC's production on a lot of things. Like there's a signature look. Like I wouldn't want to do that to I don't know, Tom Baker Doctor Who episodes any more than I would want to. Like, to me, that's part of the medium, and maybe part of it was just done for cost. But what's funny is in my head as a kid, when I said that Mina scene really stuck with me and traumatized me as a kindergartner. In my head, I actually remembered that scene looking way more video, way more of the way, again, like, older Doctor Who episodes, the video parts, because, outside scenes were often done on film, interiors were often done on video. In my head, I thought of that scene playing out as way more video. It looked less like that in the versions I've seen since then, which I hadn't caught it until probably a couple years ago when I was kind of looking for it again. Like, was that the one? And come to find out it was. But I would not. And you're talking to a person who's feels like it's my duty to turn off motion smoothing on every TV that I see that has it on, because it drives me. It's like a stab in the heart and in the face.
It is super weird. I mean, you'll come across something like Speed, a movie like Speed, and with motion smoothing turned on, suddenly it'll look like an episode of a soap opera, and it's a super.
No, it's awful. And again, we talked about it, but a lot of the problem is that since it was turned on in the early days of HD, people tended to think of it as, oh, that's just HD, when the two are dissimilar in many ways, but they came at the same time. But yes, in the same way, I do that, and it drives me crazy, but I would definitely not. I think the media is the media, and I don't think that's a thing that, it's my opinion that that's not a thing you should do.
The
directors may think differently, because they may have gone, man, I wish we could have filmed that all on film. That would have been great, but this is what we had. So, I wouldn't take that decision away from the director, but it wouldn't be a thing I would search out. Like, I don't think it's a flaw.
Thank you very much. Okay, your final thoughts, because I had interrupted your.
No, I mean,
with that question.
It's I really like it. I kind of wanted, this is another where I pitch my, this would be a super long double feature, but you could back to back this with Frankenstein, the True Story.
Yes.
Or, miniseries marathon would be, I wouldn't watch both in one sitting or anything, but you could miniseries marathon both, and that would be a really interesting thing, I think. I really enjoy it. I think there's some great stuff. There's stuff that we didn't even go over. Like, I think we talked about, in this, the Demeter is kind of, it happens, but it's way more low key. A lot of other versions have played it up a little bit more, because it also signifies this plague coming in. I think the side quest with Mina and Van Helsing, where he kind of just alludes to the fact that, hey, I think you're not being altruistic with this, but I'm going to see where this takes us, even though we have to get to the castle. and meeting the brides and all of that's a great scene, and it brings up some more folklore with how he dispels everything. I also liked where he has to show people this is what you do to vampires, but he goes, look, you can take them away right now because I'm going to cut some heads off.
Yeah.
And he has all of his instruments. Like, we're still going with that as we don't go so far as to, also burn the 2 parts and also put those ashes in water, but you could see that that's possible. I mean, even at the end, it sounds like they're near a stream, so they may have dumped all of Dracula's ashes into a running brook. By the way, I also think it's funny. Jim said, "Oh, Dracula is this evergreen kind of thing." When Jason and I have literally been told by somebody at the height of Angel and Buffy's popularity, the vampires were over, and we shouldn't pitch a vampire game because that was not going to be successful. And instead, but by the way, we should instead pitch a unsuccessful, cyberpunk-esque game that was probably going to be dated immediately, but we were told, like, vampires.
This is actually
too many
before
vampires.
Twilight. That was before Twilight was even.
But this has been happening since since way before this, because even in the IMDb it says that this production caused BBC to force the cancellation of a Tom Baker era Doctor Who serial about vampires, because they were like, no, now we've done the vampire thing.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to, like, there's room for a good. I can't say what Jason and I were going for would have been the best thing or whatever. But when somebody says there's too much of you name it, I go, there's always room for a good version of something.
Yes.
Something done passionately, something that has an interesting take, just something done well. I don't care what it is. There's always room for it. What people are saying when it gets oversaturated is, I'm sick of knockoffs that are done on the cheap, because people say that's the kind of money grubbing aspect of it is usually what people are reacting to.
Yeah, and that pander to what they think the audience wants. Yeah,
right, exactly. But I don't care what it is that you feel like there's too much of. I think there's room for a good whatever that is, no matter what.
That's true.
But I think this film, especially in split up as a miniseries, does a ton of interesting things. And again, probably put me on my horror course. I mean, it'll definitely lead to this. So it's ingrained in my horror brain as far as wanting to seek it out, but also being affected by scenes in a movie. One of my earliest memories, I think probably that same year, was when I first saw Frankenstein's monster throw a girl into a pond and be remorseful about it. There's several horror moments that have stuck with me from this year when I was in reliving, I want to say it was in Kerrville, maybe. Yeah. And watched a monster theater. But yeah, that really this movie stuck with me, as well as a bunch of other Universal stuff, and Godzilla movies, Gamma movies, Die My Jane. All of this horror business stuck with me within a couple of years. So yeah, it was kind of cool to revisit that for me, and really I enjoyed it a lot.
Very good. Thank you very much. Well, that leaves that leaves me, and I am going to leave it right there, because I think you guys have expressed everything, and I've interjected as I went along. Other than thank you, this was a wonderful film to get everybody together on. Again, especially because the Borgo Pass is called the Borgo Pass, and this. All right, I want to get endorsements. There's so much going on in pop culture right now. There's so many things to watch, and we're coming up on Halloween. We're coming up on Jim's Bloodsucker City, which is getting killer reviews like literally every single day.
But I would recommend that we keep it to one endorsement per person, if possible.
Okay,
just because we've already gone on quite long.
All right, yes. So Jim, what is your endorsement? What do you have for us?
Oh, well, as we already said, so yeah, Bloodsucker City is coming out in less than a month. It's a story about a Depression-era woman who's falsely accused of killing her child, and is sent to a maximum security women's prison in the heart of the Depression South, where all the wardens, I should say, are vampires who slowly feed off of the inmates one by one, and she has to figure out a way to not only escape but also to bring an end to the evil of Bloodsucker City. It's coming out through Castle Bridge Media, Jason's company. He was kind enough to read it for me and take it on and champion it, and I so appreciate that, because it's a story. As I wrote it as a screenplay in 2013 and shopped it around and decided it works better as a fiction story, and I'm just very excited. It's my first novella, my first fiction novella to come out, and I'm excited for it to come out. And Jason, to your point, it's funny what we were all saying about a lot of the reviews we're getting. People still mention Twilight. They're like, well, these aren't the sparkly vampires, and I didn't know that was still like
deep. Yeah.
in the zeitgeist. I mean, weren't people who watch Twilight, like, aren't they middle aged now? Like it seemed like forever ago that the movie came out, but it still is this thing that tainted the vampire subgenre apparently very deeply. It scarred people very deeply apparently. I was not a big fan, but again, like I said, the vampire can suit all tastes, and that kind of sexy romantic boyfriend vampire thing obviously had an audience, because that was a big successful book series and film series.
And it's the kind of thing that sunk in that people need to reference, even if you're very far from it. Yes,
it was a cultural touchstone. Obviously, happily, my story avoids anything even remotely resembling anything similar to Twilight. So if you're a fan of Twilight, that might not be the book for you, but I hope everyone can give it a chance. And I just want to say it was just a pleasure to be on the show with you guys, and it was a blast rapping with you.
It was great to have you, and congrats on the new book.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Drew, welcome back from New York. I don't know if you've had a chance to absorb anything, because you've been busy fighting with the longshoremen in New York and doing whatever you do. So
defending your accent.
Yeah.
Yes. So
I did pick up quite a few comics at New York Comic Con. I haven't had a chance to read them all, but I did read one the other day. It's a book called Dark Ark. It's by Cullen Bunn, and the artist is Juan Doe, and it is simply put a kind of horror mashup with biblical fantasy. What it's about is during the flood, there is Noah's Ark, which we all know, which has all the animals and people that Noah is trying to save. But then Satan also put together his own ark that is being lorded over by this sorcerer. It has all the monsters on it. It has vampires and werewolves and dragons and manticores and basically every other kind of monster you can think of. And this sorcerer is charged by the devil to not only, get these monsters through the flood, but they also has to protect Noah's Ark, because if anything happens to Noah's Ark, the monsters won't have anything to eat after the flood is over.
Great.
So it's very darkly comic, and the art is beautiful. So if you're looking for a sort of subversion of one of the most famous stories in mythology, I guess some people might resent me saying mythology, but mythology, look no further. I really thought this was super entertaining.
That's great.
Wonderful.
Damn, I'm just mad that I wasn't the one to think of that.
Yeah, that's a great
right. And that is such a good hook. Like, kudos to everyone involved in that. That's amazing. Like, just the log line of that is like, damn,
I had the same thought,
great.
Tony. I was like, wow, that is so instantly good. Yeah,
that's good. Yeah.
Very good. Julia, what about you? Do you have anything to
endorse?
I'm
just going to revisit an endorsement I made a few months ago. The second batch of episodes of The Movies That Made Us has hit Netflix, and it's Halloween time. It's perfectly set. The movies are perfect for Halloween time, including Halloween, Friday the 13th, RoboCop, the Nightmare on Elm Street, and there's a couple others. And it's so much fun. It's so much fun. Even if you know a lot of stuff about these movies, it's really neat to see, the interviews and just kind of get the context of what was going on. And it's a lot of fun. So that's my endorsement. And I've enjoyed having Scott and Jim with us. It's been fun. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Julia. Very sweet. Yeah, no, thank you so much. So recommendation for me, I'm going to stick with the kind of the podcast family here. So one podcast I've been checking out for probably the last year. I'm obviously a huge Universal fan, given the podcast that Jim and I do, but I'm also a huge Hammer fan. So this is a podcast I'd love for you guys to check out called Hammer House of Podcast. So it's hosted by actually a Scottish woman by the name of Elizabeth Miles and her English partner, Paul Cornell. And they've just got, really great chemistry. They have like that, the English, the dry wit, and they're just so passionate about the Hammer films, and kind of something similar to how, Jim and I are trying to touch all the Universal films. They are trying to hit every single Hammer film from, beginning to end. So it's a lot of fun. If I'm out on a, hike or just driving, throw them on. And I just find it so relaxing and so informative. So check it out, Hammer House of Podcast. And as, we said before, we really can't thank everybody enough. Castle of Horror, not only inspiration for me, but us as a podcaster ourselves. So just such a pleasure to be here, and thank you again so much.
That's a great tip.
Thank you
very
for
much.
coming.
Yeah. Tony, what about you?
Mostly I've been trying to play gigs, and I've been playing Metroid Dread on the Switch. That's been my mostly. I haven't watched as many movies lately, just because every night's been me trying to coordinate some things and then playing out. So, but I did notice. Well, Jason and I have had talked about Fantastic Fest, and I think we're going to do some more Fantastic Fest catch up stuff, because that's I've seen so many great movies. I think there's just really good stuff, and some of it's hitting Amazon and Netflix, and I think I love all these new movies coming out. So we're going to talk more about Fantastic Fest, but I noticed on Alamo On Demand that they actually have a subheading, heading at the top, that's Fantastic Fest 365. So it's kind of a best of Fantastic Fest video on demand section, and that is awesome to me, because I saw a few things like, oh man, I would totally revisit that. I haven't seen it. Some of the films haven't gotten physical disc or VOD distribution outside of that, so occasionally I'll find something where I haven't revisited since it played at Fantastic Fest. So I think that's really great. The film festival experience in your home is really, especially now, I find that to be pretty cool. And you can see some movies perhaps you wouldn't normally see on all the traditional on-demand platforms. Even though there's rarities, there tend to be more rarities on Amazon. The Alamo On Demand one has a pretty nicely curated festival feel. So, and I just noticed that was up there. I'm sure it's been there a while, but as I was kind of looking for, what should we talk about next about Fantastic Fest in indie film or genre film? I guess not all of it's indie. What would we talk about? And so, if you want to see some cool stuff that you may not have seen before, it's up there. Which, that's what I enjoy. Finding hidden gems is always nice.
Wonderful. My endorsement, oddly, everybody's gone to see it, so it's like endorsing the Avengers. But I really enjoyed Halloween Kills. We went to see it like on the night it opened, and it's a freight train of slasher film stuff. I really enjoyed it, and it's become quite the controversial take, because people are really split on it. But for me, I enjoyed it. I think we're going to talk about it next week. So I'll save the rest of my thoughts. But you should run out and watch it, especially if you're going to listen to our episode on Halloween Kills. It'll be fun to see how.
I still think that is the worst title for a movie I have ever heard.
Yes, I know, because nobody knows what it means. Does it mean that Halloween is a thing that kills, or does it mean these are kills that are happening on a Halloween, as opposed to like Christmas Kills or Tuesday Kills?
I mean, I'm glad they didn't call it Halloween 2, because then it would be our third movie called Halloween 2.
Yeah, that's true.
I need to look it up, but I was kind of sad that nobody had the meme like Halloween frills, and it's
Yes.
Michael Myers in like a goth Lolita dress, or maybe like a really frilly, like, oh look, it's Halloween frills.
Bowie and Labyrinth.
Yes.
Sure, Halloween frills.
I think I believe that it means these are Halloween kills that you are looking at. I think that's what it means.
Well,
Really, I have no idea.
Halloween skills to pay the Halloween bills.
That's what John Carpenter probably would call them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you very much, everybody. And if you haven't seen this movie, but somehow you've listened to this entire episode, you can find Count Dracula 1977 on Prime. And I will talk to all of you very, very soon. Thank you all, and good night.
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 Good night, guys.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks again for coming.
Thank you, Jim and Scott.